Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi of Illinois.
Congressman, good to see you. If Speaker Johnson refuses to bring a bill like the Senate-passed version to the floor, what then?
Well, I think that at this point, we're kind of in a situation where we're playing ping pong with the Senate. The Senate is not going to pass this bill that the House passed late last Friday night. And so I think we're probably going to be in a situation where we're going to continue to remain in a partial government shutdown. It's completely owned by the House Republicans. They had a bill that was unanimously passed in the Senate, including by all Republicans. And yet, basically, Speaker Johnson placated the hard far right, who doesn't want any kind of compromise. And so we're kind of in this horrible situation that we're in right now.
It is a horrible situation. It's a situation that did not have to be the case. It is one of Republicans' own making. You've got Punchbowl News saying that, basically New York Times, all have headlines saying the same thing. Let me tell you my concern, because as the viewers of this show know, I am perpetually concerned, Congressman. My concern is that this is a problem of the Republicans' making, and right now they own it. But as time drags on, that there are some, Democrats, particularly in the House, and maybe even in the Senate, that'll come over to talk to their Democratic friends in the House. They will encourage them to cut some kind of deal to get the government fully funded. And I don't think that that's something that should happen. But you know better than me how steeled is the spine of the Democratic caucus right now.
I think it's pretty strong. Look, I think that people like myself and others, we're not going to send another nickel to ICE and CBP. The current deal that was on the table was very clear about funding TSA, FEMA, Coast Guard, and other elements, and basically not ICE and CBP. And all Democrats were agreed on that, as well as Republicans in the Senate. So I think at this point, we're basically in a situation where I think the American people are going to look at the House Republican leadership and say, why can't you take yes for an answer? And along with, the Iran war spiking gas prices going up to $5 and $6 per gallon in the country, we're also seeing, inflation increase. We're seeing interest rates increase. Everything seems to be increasing in price. And now they're talking about ground troops in Iran. And so I think the American people are just up in arms and fed up at this point with the Republican Party.
Congressman, that last part is, I think, the heartbeat that a lot of Americans feel right now and that they have. We've talked about it at this table this evening in a variety of ways and forms. And I think in many respects, it's kind of summed up in the New York Times headline about the TSA problem. And it says lines are getting shorter for now, but with no guarantee about future paychecks and the partial government shutdown unresolved, the long lines could return. And that's the part that's ticking Americans off. We can't govern ourselves. We can't even pay the people to do the thing that they're there to do. Our Congress goes home in the middle of a war. We're talking about TSA, but we're a country at war, and Congress goes home. Thank you, Republicans. So what should the expectation of Americans be right now? When you come back in 2 weeks, everybody's going to act like, okay, nothing's happened. But gas will be over $4 a gallon. The war will be into its 6th week. You'll have prices going crazy at the grocery store and elsewhere. And guess what? Those TSA lines could have returned because, yet again, there's still questions about how much these TSA folks were paid today. Not everybody got the amount they should have gotten. Can we just get people off the stupid merry-go-round of Congress and guys just fix the problem?
I think you asked the right question. What should the American people's expectation be? It should be a functioning government, not a dysfunctional, chaotic government, which is what we see, especially with the House Republican leadership, which seems to put its own interests ahead of what's in the best interest of their constituents. I can guarantee you that their constituents would have wanted that unanimously passed Senate bill to come before the House and to get a bipartisan majority and pass and put this TSA issue to bed. Instead, unfortunately, the leadership of the House decided that they were more interested in getting votes of these hard right conservatives for their future prospects. Remember, they're also vying for their future House leadership positions at the same time that they're doing everything else. And so, basically their constituents are wondering, are you putting your personal interest first or mine? And I think they're soon concluding that it's their House leadership positions, personal interest being put first. And it's causing all kinds of problems. I mean, you just see it in Trump's and the Republicans' popularity ratings, even on cost of living issues. I think I saw that 2/3 of Americans now disapprove of their handling of cost of living issues, not to mention more than 60% of general economic issues, which used to be something that they pointed to as a strength. And so right now, it's clear they're not putting the American people's interest first, and that's coming through loud and clear in their actions and the chaos and dysfunction.
Speaking of chaos and dysfunction, I'm not sure if you caught Tom Homan on Face the Nation talking about the possibility of keeping ICE agents at airports. Take a listen.
We're going to continue an ICE presence there until the airports feel like they're in 100%, in a posture where they can do normal operations. So if less TS agents come back, that means we'll keep more ICE agents there. The president has been clear. He wants to secure those airports, especially, as I said earlier, in an increased threat posture. We need to secure those airports. ICE is there to help our brothers and sisters in TSA. We'll be there as long as they need us.
One, Congressman, do you have any concern that this is in large part to position ICE in airports so they can drive up their numbers and meet the quotas that they're having difficulty meeting in other ways? And to my understanding is Congress has very limited options when it comes to stopping them. Your sense of where the checks and balances are?
So the answer to your first question is yes. And as an immigrant myself, that's deeply, deeply disturbing, because people of my skin tone and others, regardless of where they come from, they feel terrorized by ICE and CBP at this point. And people in Chicago feel the same. So absolutely, that is wrong for ICE agents to be there. Secondly, they're ineffective with regard to what TSA does. They're not trained in basically helping to speed up the processing of people through lines. They don't know what they're doing in that regard. And so basically, as you see from both anecdotal evidence and otherwise, they're just standing around in these airports as of this moment. They're not really assisting in any way. And I think that the best way to handle this, again, is to take up a deal to pay the TSA along with Coast Guard and FEMA and other elements, and move on with the situation with DHS.